is twofold. There is on the power side and on the water side. But some of the counties where, like between Mombasa and Kilifi, Mutwapa, we find that the power has been already provided by KPLC to Vipingo. There's existing infrastructure there for power. The challenge they have is the water side. So we as an investor are going ahead and saying we shall invest in a desalination plant, 3,000 cubic meters per day, to cover the potential future. And that investment as well will be profitable for us. So that's not something we're leaving the county government to do. Because if you look at the population growth in that area in the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be huge considering you're doing 8,000 units of affordable and social housing and the industry. So some of those investments will not leave for the government. We'll have to actually do them ourselves, and the roads as well.
Okay, thank you.
We wanted to cover counties where we could meet the 95% statistical accuracy that we need to run the House Land Index. We covered about 45,000 price points of advertised land records. I think what we saw over the last 5 years was, well, particularly in 2017, what we saw in the last year was a marked slowdown. So we saw land prices increase across the counties on average at about 7%, but that was down from about 12% in 2016. As we all know, there were two main dampeners to land pricing across the board, and that was the political uncertainty from a prolonged election. And we saw a lot of people holding out their investment decisions during this time. I think it was a scenario we hadn't seen before, and a lot of investors, even the ones who are normally quite astute during slow periods, held out. We also saw that there was a scarcity of finance, both from the interest rate cap that saw banks underpricing their risk, and so they were holding out on the amount of finance they were giving out. The second thing that also resulted in a halt on liquidity in the market was, I think, a stall in government spending from, I think it was from October onwards. And when we see this liquidity get swept from the market, it directly affects the land pricing, as people are not able to put in investment funding into land, particularly in the counties. But what's more interesting, I know there's a lot of talk also saw that counties with strong economies, namely Nakuru and Kisumu, also bucked the trend, which is particularly interesting because Kisumu normally is a hot zone for electoral tension. But we saw Kisumu Kisumu town land prices rise 14% in 2017, and that is because it was insulated by its strong economy, which is backed by the agricultural activities in the area, as well as the influx of finance and business. When looking through the different towns, we were able to see that Kenya is experiencing for the first time, I think, the steps of the urban regeneration cycle. So what's happening is what we normally see in very old economies is normally large elite suburbs, with the increasing gentrification in the market, sees more middle income earners move into a high-end area, and what happens is the elite then escape this area, and we're seeing that in Nyali and Ridgeways particularly. In Ridgeways, we've seen that there's been a lot of infrastructure development around it that has drawn the middle class, And so we're seeing the flight of the elite from ridgeways, and what happens then is we see the land prices take a bit of a knock. We've seen the same thing in Nyali with new apartment projects coming in and a lot of the elite fleeing Nyali. What then later happens is as people flock the elite flock from these areas, and this is sort of something that happens over decades and decades, but we're seeing little spots of it in Kenya. When at the end of the cycle, when people come back to these suburbs, mainly because of the convenience of their location to the main center, we see land prices in those areas go up. We're seeing this in Embakasi, particularly in Donholm. I think in closing, what I would say is it's one thing to look at the numbers of what's going up and what's going down, but the real story is in what is the drivers of the numbers. Thika Town, for example, increased 30% in land prices in 2016. And if we had just looked at that and flocked to Thika Town, you'll notice that in 2017, there was a 4% drop in land prices there because it had overheated in Thika. But if we understand the drivers of that growth and understand if that growth is set to continue, then it makes our investment decisions easier.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Vivian, maybe I'll...
Thank you very much. Yes, just to take you briefly through what Centum does, Centum Real Estate. We actually develop urban nodes in strategic locations across East Africa. We've got in Entebbe, Uganda. We've got here in Vipingo, Mombasa, and one in Two Rivers here in Kenya, on the side. So typically what we do as a master developer, we acquire these sites, and there's a couple of issues we need to sort out before we acquire the sites. We need access. So we need access and infrastructure-ready sites from the government side, access to our sites in terms of water, power, and roads. Then we develop the internal infrastructure of our sites so that when we go out to the market, we're actually delivering shovel-ready sites. That is for ourselves. If we get involved in top developments, for example, Two Rivers, the mall, that is our own development we did on the top level. But we've also been able to attract investors from abroad. We've got the City Lodge Hotel. We've got Victoria Bank as well there. So it's a mixture of both. Hello? Okay, so sorry, I was telling you, so it's a mixture of both from our side. We develop the sites, we choose the locations which are strategic, which come with roads, power, and then we develop the internal sites with the same infrastructure. So for going forward, we try and de-risk our sites from being just a single user site. So when we do our master developments, it's a mixture of residential, retail, and a commercial component. So it's kind of de-risking our leverage on these properties. In terms of the Pingo, where we've got quite a significant land of about 10,000, which is master planned, we are in our phase 1 right now, which involves an industrial park set on 180 acres with an EPZ license and some light industrial parks that we're doing. So we're doing the infrastructure for that. Take about 18 months to do that, which is roads, power, and because Mombasa has a problem of water, we're also doing a desalination plant to provide water for the entire development. On the government side, we are partnering with the government on social housing. So we've master planned an area in Vipingo. It's about 250 acres. We're looking at doing about 8,000 to 9,000 units. The first thing we'll do is provide the infrastructure. We'll do some of the top build, but also we'll invite investors to also come and join in the top build for the social and affordable housing. So basically, in a nutshell, that's what we're doing currently in the market.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open up.
So the residential part is that we'll have to always keep at the back of our mind that affordable housing has now become one of the pillars for the government to achieve. So that has been the main rollout for affordable housing into the various counties other than just Nairobi. The other real estate sector that has gained a bit of popularity to the other counties other than Nairobi are hospitality. So we have witnessed now inquiries and interest from developers who are thinking of setting up conference facilities and hotel rooms in the other counties just to cater for, as we now experience this the robustness of conferencing and driven by different corporates, UN included. So there's an interest of having a sustainable conference facility, and with that comes, the rooms where delegates can spend the night, and that is quality room. The other interest has been industrial. So this has been driven by the expansion of the various infrastructural aspects. For instance, the airport, the expansion of JKIA, the expansion of the port, and also the port in Mombasa and Lamu, and also the expansion of road. So with that comes or attracts logistics, especially Kenya having a port and transporting this to landlocked countries like Uganda. So there has been a drive for, and also the SGR, so there has been a drive for developing quality logistics space other than what is locally known as go-downs, which have a lower spec. So people are looking more into actually international standard, building international standard warehousing. We have witnessed this, or continue to witness this, in especially at the Nairobi peripheral areas like Kiambu County and Machakos County or Mavoko Sub-County, mainly also driven by the availability of lands to put up a vast logistics park and also relatively cheap land. The other drive is that the government has now, or well, a while back, set aside the special economic zones, which also offered the tax advantages and tax rebates to attract investors. So that is the other propeller for logistics. The other one is retail, of course. However, this is taking momentum very slowly, not as fast, especially last year after the struggles that the main superstores underwent, local main superstores, that affected most of the malls that they were anchor tenants in. So I believe now Kenyans have come to an understanding of how to maximize on the tenant mix, and also having more interest and more interest from international retailers and local retailers as well. The other challenge that might have affected the rollout of retail space to the second tier cities is perhaps the inefficient assessment of the demographics. So you find that there has been some retail malls that do not necessarily work for that demographics, because the demographics ask for, or their needs are different, say in Nakuru, to the demographics, say in a mall in Runda. So the replication of the tenant mix and the concepts from one city to another might not necessarily work. So there has to be a need to carry out a detailed occupier survey and just to understand the demographics, the catchment area, and the needs. Thank you.
Thank you.
When you look at land price inflation, it's not necessarily a factor of housing demand. So, for example, there's been a lot of counties, even within, there's been a lot of satellite towns in and around Nairobi whose land price inflation has been very high. But when you try to go in with housing, the market isn't ready for it yet. So the land price inflation could be a factor of speculation initially. So I wouldn't say it's very linear in that any place that's seeing land price inflation necessarily is ready for housing. What I would say is when you're looking at where to go in with housing is to look at what is the underlying demand structure. Is it a vibrant economy, locally to be able to push that sort of housing demand? I think the two places that we're seeing it in at the moment is Nakuru and Kisumu. Nakuru more stably and Kisumu more so in the last year. I think after the post-election violence of a couple of years ago, a lot of the economic activity from the region moved to Nakuru. There was a lot of influx of finance and there was a lot of growth within Nakuru. So I do think it has been expanding, and its housing needs perhaps are at a stage that Nairobi was 15 years ago, which is what every developer wants to hear because those were good times. And as Nairobi reaches some sort of supply stagnations in some pockets of the market, developers are looking for areas where they still see that need for all real estate asset classes is needed across the board. And I think from what we're seeing from the data, I would say that what supports housing development is the areas with strong economic activity, so that's Nakuru and Kisumu, and perhaps start looking at the areas with infrastructure development, but that should incorporate more of your long-term housing plans.
You're actually right, Kafir. It's now, I think the market is now embracing the idea of having the neighborhood malls or small retail centers, and also expanding to not only the formal retailers, but also to informal retailers, because as we understand, the formal tenant base is very slim. And then that's where we get the problem of tenant mix, because at any particular point you'll find each mall having the same tenant and also the tenant mix and offering the same product to the market, irrespective of the catchment area. So when we expand this to incorporate informal retailers and also offer them slightly flexible tenancies other than the normal commercial leases of a minimum of 5 years and 1 month, which then requires them to put in a hefty initial outlay that may not actually be feasible to their kind of business. So we have now witnessed inquiries of what we call pop-up stores, just small boxes for informal retailers and offering licenses of anything less than the normal commercial lease requirement of 5 years and 1 month, say a year or so, for them to just try the waters and see if it fits with their business model and if they can still be able to pay the rent on time. Because at the end of the day, the landlord or the owner of the property is looking forward to is maximizing his return. So, and also encouraging full occupancies. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much. Yes, just to take you briefly through what Centum does, Centum Real Estate. We actually develop urban nodes in strategic locations across East Africa. We've got in Entebbe, Uganda. We've got here in Vipingo, Mombasa, and one in Two Rivers here in Kenya, Runda side. So typically what we do as a master developer, we acquire these sites, and there's a couple of issues we need to sort out before we acquire the sites. We need access. So we need access and infrastructure-ready sites from the government side access to our sites in terms of water, power, and roads. Then we develop the internal infrastructure of our sites so that when we go out to the market, we're actually delivering shovel-ready sites. That is for ourselves. If we get involved in top development, for example, Two Rivers, the mall, that is our own development we did on the top level. But we've also been able to attract investors from abroad. We've got the City Lodge Hotel. We've got Victoria Bank as well there. So it's a mixture of both. Hello? Okay, so sorry, I was telling you, so it's a mixture of both from our side. We develop the sites, we choose the locations which are strategic, which come with roads, power, and then we develop the internal sites with the same infrastructure. So for going forward, we try and de-risk our sites from being just a single user site. So when we do our master developments, it's a mixture of residential, retail, and a commercial component. So it's kind of de-risking our leverage on these properties. In terms of Vipingo, where we've got quite a significant land of about 10,000, which is master planned, we are in our phase 1 right now, which involves an industrial park set on 180 acres with an EPZ license and some light industrial parks that we're doing. So we're doing the infrastructure for that. Take about 18 months to do that, which is roads, power, and because Mombasa has a problem of water, we're also doing a desalination plant to provide water for the entire development. On the government side, we are partnering with the government on social housing. So we've master planned an area in Vipingo. It's about 250 acres. We're looking at doing about 8,000 to 9,000 units. The first thing we'll do is provide the infrastructure. We'll do some of the top build, but also we'll invite investors to also come and join in the top build for the social and affordable housing. So basically, in a nutshell, that's what we're doing currently in the market.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm going to open up